Now we have been over the basics, how to code in C#. In this course, we're gonna move one step further and learn new techniques, how the code works under Unity 2019. In this course, we're gonna learn how to work with constructors, how to define the static types, singleton design, and namespaces. The content you will find in this course will help you upgrade your programming skills under Unity. If you are not familiar with the C# programming, you can start my C# programming course for beginners. I will put the link in the description section below. Let's get started. Hello guys, in this tutorial we're gonna learn how to work with properties in C#. So properties are ways for C# to automatically add setters and getters for you. A getter and a setter are basically two types of methods that we can use on our code. The goal behind using properties in C# is to access data or to save values. Using the getters and the setters, we can access the attribute of those classes. So if you want to create a property, the syntax of the property works like this. First, you need to specify the access modifier. Then you specify the type followed by the name of the property. After adding the name of the property, you need to place open and closed braces, same as creating a new function. A property can have two accessors, get and set. Using the property is very easy. That's why if you want to create a new property, all you need to do is to create a set and open and close braces, then write get and open and close braces. Make sure that you return the field that you are encapsulating in your get accessor. In the set accessor, we allocate the field using the keyword value. Using properties, we can secure data that we're gonna use in our code. Now let's see how properties work and let's create a new lolchamp class. This lolchamp class is very simple. We are making a new champ for League of Legends. Every champ needs a name, a role, and a cost. So this is the template for a lol champ. And down here we have to create this constructor. On the next tutorial we're gonna learn how to make constructors and how to work with them. But for today let's focus on setters and getters. So this constructor is passing the name, role, and cost data. Now let's try to create a new program that uses the lolchamp class. In this program, we have two new LOL champs. The first one is Timo and the second is Rengar. Every champ in League of Legends has a cost, depends on the champ role and abilities. For example, we can find expensive champs such as Senna, or we can find some others cheaper such as Timo or Akali or even Severe. The problem is, what if we want to enforce that our code accepts only those cost values? We can change the cost for 0, for example, and write it here in the console. Console.writeline timo.cost. If we execute the code, only the cost will be printed, but 0 is not one of the values we already talked about here. What properties can give us in this situation is preventing this from happening. In order to use setters and getters in this code, we need to modify a couple of things. The first thing we need to do is to close the access to our variables. As you can see here, they are all public. A public name, a public role, and a public cost. Now let's try to change the access mode of our cost variable to private. This means only code inside this class can access to it. Now we're gonna create our setter and getter for our cost variable. After using setters and getters in a private variable, we can access it and change the values. Let's go back to our class and let's add a new property. First, we need to define the access mode. Let's define it as public. Then let's define the type, string. Then we give the property name and open and close braces. Now let's add a new setter and getter properties. Getter and setter. A getter will allow us to read data from the property, and a setter will allow us to assign values to the property. Now inside the getter, let's return the cost. Just type return cost and don't forget the semicolon. Now in the setter, we need to assign the variable name to the keyword value. Now we can make a conditional statement with if or switch to check if the cost of the champ we're gonna assign is already exist on the list. But I'm not going to do that because we are going to focus on the setters and getters in this tutorial. Now we have been over the basics, how to work, define and use properties. In the next course, we're gonna learn how to work with the constructors in C#. Now we have seen how to define setters and getters in C#. Let's go ahead and learn how to work with constructors. Constructors allow you to prepare your objects before you use it. It gives you the ability to create objects and assign values at the same time. If you want to use constructors, the syntax is very easy to use. First, you need to start with the access modifier. Next, you need to define the name of the object. Next, you add the data you want to assign in your constructor. One of the most powerful points in using constructors is the return type. There is no need for the return statement. Since it is a constructor, the return type is inferred and not necessary. Now let's go back to the Visual Studio and let's create a new enemy class. Every enemy has a name, a health, and a damage amount. Now we have our enemy class is ready for use. Let's go ahead and create a new program class. In our main method, we have two enemies, an orc and a goblin. As we said before, a constructor is a special method inside of a class that's gonna get called when we create an object for this class. Now let's go back to our enemy class and let's add a new constructor. And inside of our constructor, let's print a message. Over here in our main method, we're gonna run the program. Now if we hit the execute button, you will notice that it says building enemy twice. The result is printed twice because we created two enemies. So whenever we create an enemy, the text will be printed. Now let's pass a string name on our constructor. And then down here, let's print out the name. Over here in the main method, we need to pass only one parameter. Enemy goblin is equal to new enemy goblin. Let's say we're gonna add goblin as a name here and orc for the second enemy. Now when we run our program, it's gonna print out goblin and orc because we are calling that enemy constructor. Now if you notice, our goblin took 4 lines of code and our orc also took 4 lines of code. So it took 8 lines of code just to create 2 objects. Not only that, but we had to manually type out enemy1.name is equal to goblin and enemy1.health is equal to 50. That's a big waste of time if we want to do that every time we want to create an enemy. Now what we want to do is to pass all the enemy data in one line. Over here, our enemy constructor is gonna take 3 parameters. The first one is going to be a name, and this is gonna stand for argument name. The second is a health, and the last one is a damage. Once we define our arguments inside of this enemy, we need to pass values. Now, if we want to go to our main program, we need to pass all the same arguments as values in our main method. Now, what we can do is deleting this code and passing the values inside of the constructor. Now we have passed from 8 lines of code to create these enemies, so now we have 2 lines of code. Now let's try to print the damage of our goblin. So let's just type console.writeLine goblin.damage. If we run our program, you will notice that 6 is printed out. Now if we want to update the damage value, we just need to type goblin.damage equal to 9. And now it will be updated to 9. Now we have learned how to define and use constructors. In the next tutorial we're gonna learn how to work with static types. Now we have seen how to define properties and how to work with constructors. Today we're gonna learn about static types. Before we speak about statics, let's speak about the type. So it is basically the class or the script you are writing. Now if we create a new enemy class in Unity, our class will be a type. But if we create a game object and apply our enemy script to it, our script will be just an instance. There is two things. The original script that we're gonna call a type, and there is the instance over here. Now when we add static in front of a variable or a method, it belongs to the type instead of the instance. Normally, when we create this instance, we may have some data inside it, such as health, damage amount, and speed. And all of those data belongs to the enemy. But you can set certain things that belong to the type, and it will be the same for all the enemies. When we use a static type, the memory is taken up indefinitely for the life of our program. In C# we have something, we call it garbage collection. Every time we use the new keyword, garbage collection is called to free up the memory. For example, if we create a new static int, this new variable is taking up memory for the life of our program. Now if we create a new class, we can access that variable directly. All we need to do is writing the class name dot and the name of the static variable. Now let's create a new static method. This new method will reset the position to 0. Our method is static, so we can access it very easily from other classes. In the start function, let's reset the position. Now let's go back to Unity and create a new cube. Let's apply our script and hit the play button. As you see, our cube's position is equal to 0. In mobile games, try not to use static types very much, because in mobile games, memory is everything. If you use too much static types in your game, it will be automatically crashed. Now we have learned how and when to use static types. On the next tutorial, we're gonna learn about singleton design in C#. Singleton is a class that can only have one instance in any given time, and it can be accessed from any other class. Many people call it singleton manager. The reason behind that because of the design concept. Most commonly in Unity that we use the singletons in manager design. Singletons are often used to store game states or for manager classes. For example, if you have a class that manages all the user interfaces or audio or even the story in your game, in those cases you can use a singleton as a manager for your game. The singleton is a powerful design pattern that helps you organize the structure of the logic of your game. Now let's open up Unity 3D and create a new manager class. Go ahead and remove the start and the update methods since we won't need them. The game manager will contain only the things that will be created only one time on your game, such as enemy spawner and audio managers. Anything that will be created multiple times in the game should never be a singleton. Generally, we use static types on the game manager, so if we use it on things that can be created multiple times, it will be a great memory loss. First, we need to create a private instance of the script. So private static The type is gonna be the same as the name of the class, game manager. And then we're gonna name it instance with an underscore. Now let's create a new property and call it instance. So what we need to do is to create a new object. So we need to test if our underscore instance is null. That means if our class doesn't exist, we need to create it. So let's create a new game object and call it game manager. Now once we create that object, we need to apply this game manager component to it. Now, if the instance equal to null, we're gonna create a new game object. If it is not null, we're gonna return the instance. Now we need to assign the instance. So now the instance is equal to this. Now let's define two public variables and go back to Unity and create a new C# script. Now we need to access our manager script instance from here. All we need to do is to write gamemanager.instance. Now we have access to all those variables. If we want to do something similar to our property tutorial, all we need to do is to go back to our manager script and change the code. If we want to assign new values, all we need to do is to create a new function start. Now if we go back to our script and access our public variables, it's gonna be the same. We can access any data in the game manager. Now we have seen how to define singletons and how to work with them. On the next tutorial, we're gonna learn how to work with namespaces. Hello guys, this is Tawfiq Shabi and welcome back to learning C# scripting in Unity. In this last tutorial of this course, we're gonna cover namespaces. Namespaces are heavily used in C# programming in two ways. First, the .NET framework uses namespaces to organize its many classes. The using keyword is used so that the complete name is not required. Second, declaring your own namespaces can help you control the scope of the class and method names in larger programming projects. Using C#, we can create our own libraries. Now let's go back to Unity and learn how to create our own namespace. But before we do that, let's create a new C# script and call it my library. Inside the code, delete the start and the update functions. When we start creating our namespace, first we need to start with the word namespace, then give it a name. So we're gonna name it my library. Inside of it, let's create a new class that reset our possession. Let's call it possession. This possession class contains a method inside of it that will reset the possession of our game object. Now let's define a new variable, public static vector3, and let's give it a name, reset my possession, and it's gonna return vector3.0. Now let's go back to Unity and create a new class. Let's call it player class. Now we need to access our new library. In order to do that, we need to use the new keyword using. Now we have our library namespace is ready to use. We can access our class on the start method. All we need to do is to access the transform.possession and assign the new variable our class.resetPossession method. Now we have finished working with namespaces. Our C# programming course for the intermediate level is finished. Next, we're gonna be covering some advanced techniques that can help you improving your programming skills under Unity.